You have been in the room the entire time, and she has already noticed 5 things about you that you have never once thought to pay attention to. Most men over 60 walk into a room thinking about what they are going to say, how they are going to introduce themselves, whether they look presentable enough. They are focused entirely on the performance, on the content, on the words. But she is not waiting for the words. Long before you open your mouth, her nervous system has already run a silent assessment of you that she herself could not fully put into words. And what she assessed had nothing to do with your age, your height, or what you were wearing. It had to do with 5 specific physical signals that women are wired at a neurological level to read in men. Signals that communicate something far deeper than appearance, something about your history, your health, your emotional world, your relationship with yourself, and whether you are the kind of man who makes a room feel steadier just by being in it. Nobody ever mapped this out for you. Nobody told you which parts of your physical presence were doing the talking before you ever spoke. And so for decades, you may have been investing your attention in the wrong things entirely. This was never your fault. The conversation about male attractiveness after 60 has always been shallow. Gym tips, grooming advice, dress better, stand straighter. But none of that gets to what is actually happening in her perception when she notices a man across the room and something in her simply says, him. Stay with me until the 4th signal on this list. That is the one most men have written off entirely. And it is quietly one of the most powerful things a man over 60 carries. If this matters to you, tap like right now and let us get into it. This is the channel where we go beneath the surface of attraction and connection and give men over 45 what they were never handed. The real psychology of how women perceive, feel, and choose. Research in evolutionary psychology and social neuroscience has been studying what women notice in men for decades, and the findings consistently point away from the obvious and toward the subtle. Dr. Devendra Singh at the University of Texas, whose landmark work on physical perception and attraction has been replicated across cultures and age groups, found that what women respond to most powerfully in a man's physical presence is not any single feature in isolation, but the coherence of signals, the way the parts of his physical self tell a consistent story. A story about vitality, about self-possession, about whether this is a man who is at home in his own body or at war with it. And here is what makes this conversation particularly important for men over 60. The signals that communicate the most attractive qualities in older men are not the signals of youth. They are the signals of depth, of settledness, of a man who has lived fully and carries it well. These are things that cannot be faked by a younger man. They are earned. And most men over 60 are carrying them without knowing it. The cost of not knowing this is a quiet one. It is the cost of walking through rooms full of possibility and not understanding what you are radiating, not knowing which parts of your physical presence are already doing extraordinary work for you, and which parts you may have been unconsciously abandoning. So let us name them. 5 physical signals, what they communicate, why they register the way they do, and what it looks like when a man understands them. The first body part women notice is the hands. Not the size of them, not whether they are smooth or rough, but what they reveal about how a man inhabits the world. Dr. William Chaplin at the University of Alabama conducted research specifically on handshakes and physical gesture, finding that the way a man uses his hands communicates a comprehensive psychological profile, including dominance, openness, neuroticism, and extroversion, before a single word is exchanged. But beyond the handshake, research in kinesics, the study of body movement and gesture, shows that hand behavior during conversation is one of the most revealing physical channels available to an observer. Women read it constantly and largely unconsciously. What they are reading is not what most men think. They are not looking for manicured nails or soft skin. They are reading stillness versus restlessness. Men who fidget with their hands, who tap surfaces, who pull at their fingers, who clasp and unclasp repeatedly, communicate low-grade anxiety, a nervous system that is not fully settled. And that restlessness transfers. It creates a low-level tension in the people around them. Men whose hands are still, not rigid, not forced, but naturally resting or moving with deliberate purpose when they speak, communicate something entirely different. They communicate a man who is comfortable enough in the present moment that his body does not need to discharge nervous energy through movement. For men over 60, this signal carries particular weight because the hands of a man who has worked, built, created, repaired, who has done things with his hands over a lifetime, those hands tell a story, not of vanity, of use, of a life lived in contact with the actual world. Imagine this. You are at a dinner table and a man across from you is speaking. His hands rest on the table, easy and open, moving only when the words call for it. There is no fidgeting, no performance. His hands look like they belong where they are. And without knowing why, everyone at the table feels slightly more settled in his presence. The room organizes itself around his stillness. This communicates, I am not braced for anything, I am here, and here is enough. The second physical signal women notice is the quality of a man's posture. Not military straightness, not performed uprightness, something far more nuanced and far more telling. Research by Dr. Amy Cuddy at Harvard Business School on postural expansion and psychological state demonstrated that posture is not simply the result of how a man feels about himself. It is also a real-time signal to every person in the room about his relationship with space, with authority, and with his own presence. But what Cuddy's research also revealed, and what is less often discussed, is that the most commanding posture is not the most rigid one. It is the most relaxed, expansive one. The posture of a man who takes up exactly as much space as he naturally occupies, no more, no less, without apology and without aggression. Women notice collapsed posture immediately. The rounding of the upper back, the forward curl of the shoulders, the downward angle of the chin. And what they read in it is not simply physical decline. They read defeat. They read a man who has spent years making himself smaller, in relationships, in rooms, in his own estimation. And that reading, however unconscious, does not produce attraction. It produces a kind of compassion that has nothing romantic in it. But there is something about posture in men over 60 that carries a unique power when it is present. Because the upright, easy, unhurried physical carriage of an older man does not read as the performance of youth. It reads as the earned confidence of a man who has survived enough to stop needing to compress himself for anyone. It reads as dignity. And dignity is deeply, fundamentally attractive at any age. Imagine this. Two men walk into the same room within minutes of each other. The first is taller, younger, better dressed. But he carries himself with a slight forward lean, a subtle collapsing inward, as though he is always slightly reaching for something he has not quite grasped. The second man is older, less striking by conventional measure, but he moves through the room like it already belongs to him, and he is simply passing through it. His shoulders are back, not rigidly, but naturally. His chin is level, his pace is unhurried. And she, across the room, notices the second man, not the first. This communicates, I have arrived, not to impress you, simply because this is where I am, and I am comfortable being here. The third signal is one that surprises many men when they first hear it, because it is not a body part in the conventional sense. It is the eyes, specifically how a man uses them during conversation. Dr. Kellerman, in research published in the Journal of Research and Personality, studied mutual gaze and its effects on emotional connection between strangers. The findings were striking. Extended, warm, attentive eye contact, the kind that says, I am fully here with you, I am not scanning the room for someone more interesting, created rapid and significant feelings of closeness, trust, and what participants describe simply as being genuinely seen. For men over 60, this signal operates on an additional layer. Because the eyes of a man who has lived with emotional intelligence, who has learned to sit with difficulty, who has known loss, who has learned to truly listen, carry a quality that younger eyes simply have not yet earned. Psychologists sometimes describe it as depth of gaze. Not intensity, not staring, depth. The sense that behind the eyes looking at her is a man with interior life, with complexity, with a world inside him that would take time to understand. What women find themselves drawn to in this is not romance initially. It is recognition, because most people walk through life feeling slightly invisible. And a man whose eyes say, I actually see you. I am not looking through you. I am not looking past you. I am looking at you, creates an experience she associates entirely with him. A word of caution here. There is a version of prolonged eye contact that feels like surveillance rather than connection. The distinction lies in warmth. Focused eyes without warmth read as intensity or even aggression. Focused eyes that are also soft, that carry interest rather than assessment, these read as safety, as genuine attention, and women know the difference immediately. Imagine this. You are talking with someone at a gathering and mid-sentence, something in the room shifts, a sound, a movement, someone passing by. Most men's eyes flick toward it automatically, but you stay. Your eyes remain with hers, not dramatically, not as performance, simply because what she is saying actually matters to you more than whatever just happened behind you. And she notices. Not consciously enough to name it in the moment. But she notices. And later, thinking back on the conversation, she realizes she felt unusually at ease with you, unusually present herself, because you were present with her. This communicates, you are the most interesting thing in this room to me. And I am not saying that. I am simply showing it. None of this works without genuine care for the person in front of you. A man who has learned these signals and deploys them without actual interest in the woman he is with will be felt as hollow, as performing. Women have a sensitivity to authenticity that no technique can substitute for. What we are describing here is not a set of moves. It is a way of being that produces these signals naturally when the underlying orientation, genuine interest, genuine presence, genuine respect is actually there. If this is landing somewhere real for you, subscribe to this channel. Every video here goes deeper. And what comes next will take this further than most men ever go. The fourth signal, the one I mentioned at the beginning, the one most men over 60 have written off without realizing what they are carrying. It is the face, not the symmetry of it, not the youth of it, something that only time can put there, and that women read with a level of attention most men never anticipate. Research in social perception, including work by Dr. Alexander Todorov at Princeton University, on face-based judgments, demonstrates that human observers form rapid and specific impressions from faces, impressions that go far beyond simple attractiveness. What observers consistently rate most positively in older male faces is not smoothness or conventionally youthful structure. It is what researchers describe as expressive coherence, the sense that a man's face shows the history of a person who has felt things deeply and processed them honestly. The lines in a man's face are not neutral. They tell a story. And the story they tell depends on which lines are deepest. A man whose deepest lines are around his eyes, from decades of genuine laughter, of looking into distance, of squinting into sunlight on days when he was fully alive, carries a face that communicates a life well inhabited. A man whose deepest lines are between his brows, from chronic tension, from decades of unprocessed worry, from a relationship with his own mind that was more adversarial than accepting, carries a different story entirely. Women read this, not deliberately, not analytically, but they read it the way people read the sky, absorbing information about what kind of weather is coming before they have consciously processed any individual cloud. For men over 60, this means something powerful. The face you have is the result of the life you have lived and the emotions you have chosen to carry. And the man who has done his inner work, who has let joy move through him freely, who has processed grief rather than holding it as permanent tension, who has learned to be at ease in his own skin, carries a face that communicates that settledness to every person who looks at him. Imagine this. Two men of similar age, similar background, similar lives by external measure. One has spent decades in quiet resistance to his own experience, suppressing, avoiding, holding things tight. The other has learned, slowly and imperfectly, to feel what was there and let it move through. Their faces, by 60, look like different countries. One looks defended, the other looks inhabited. And she, without knowing anything about their histories, without exchanging a word with either, feels the difference across a room. A woman told me something once at a reunion that I have never forgotten. She said she had been briefly introduced to a man at the event. Older, not conventionally striking. She said what stopped her was his face. She said it looked like a face that had been somewhere, that had returned. She said, I just wanted to know where he had been and what he had learned. And that wanting, that pull toward the story behind the face, became the beginning of something real. This communicates something no amount of grooming or styling can replicate. I have lived, I have felt, I am still here, and I carry it without shame. The fifth and final signal is the voice. Not the tone of it, not the volume, the pace and the weight. Research in psychoacoustics, the study of how sound affects psychological and emotional states, has consistently found that vocal pace is one of the most powerful subconscious signals of internal state. Dr. David Huron at Ohio State University, whose work on music and emotion overlaps significantly with vocal perception, describes how slow, measured, unhurried speech activates the parasympathetic nervous system in listeners. It literally calms the body of the person hearing it, whereas rapid, compressed, anxious speech activates a mild stress response. The listener's body begins to match the urgency it is detecting. Men who speak quickly, who rush to fill silence, who compress their words as though there is a deadline on the conversation, communicate internal pressure. And internal pressure, however invisible, transfers. It makes her feel slightly more alert, slightly more braced, slightly less able to fully relax into the interaction. Men who speak slowly, not laboriously, not without confidence, but with the unhurried pace of someone who knows their words are worth the wait, communicate something entirely different. They communicate a man who is not afraid of silence, who does not need to prove himself through volume or speed, who has enough internal solidity that he can afford to take his time. For men over 60, this is another earned signal, because the deliberate pace of speech that reads as profound in an older man reads as uncertain in a younger one. It takes years of living to slow your words down, not out of hesitation, but out of settledness. And women who spend so much of their social lives navigating men who are performing, who are rushing, who are reaching, feel the difference in their bodies before their minds have named it. Imagine this. You are in a conversation and someone asks you something. And instead of answering immediately, you take a breath. You let the question settle and then you speak, steadily, without rushing. Not because you are searching for words, but because you are not in a hurry. And in that unhurried response, she feels the quality of your presence more clearly than anything you actually say. She leans in slightly, not dramatically, but her body moves toward the source of the steadiness. This communicates, I am not anxious about this conversation. I am not anxious about you. I have nowhere else I need to be. And that freedom from urgency is one of the most rare and settling things a person can encounter. Here is the truth that lives beneath all 5 of these signals. None of them are about looking younger. None of them are about competing with the men in the room who have more years ahead of them than behind them. They are about something those men cannot offer. They are about depth, about settledness, about the specific, earned, irreplaceable quality of a man who has lived a full life and is still fully present in it. The still hands, the open posture, the eyes that stay, the face that has been somewhere and returned, the voice that is unhurried. These are not the signals of youth. They are the signals of something rarer, of a man who is genuinely, completely, unhurriedly himself. And there is no age at which that stops being the most magnetic thing a person can be. Most men will never understand what they are already carrying. They will keep looking outward for the right outfit, the right haircut, the right opening line. But you came here. You stayed. And something in you already knew that the answer was not out there. It was in how you inhabit what you already are. Leave the word depth in the comments below if this landed somewhere true for you. Just that word, it is enough. Subscribe if you have not already. Tap the bell, because the next video takes this somewhere most men never go. Into what happens inside her when all 5 of these signals are present in the same man at the same time. What she feels, what she decides, and why it stays with her long after the room has emptied.